as like, you know, love is just, you know, the desire to come together. I mean, eros being the desires, but you're lacking something. Yeah. Now, what is it that will fulfill it? Is it another individual, or is it something in between? You know, between you and the other. How many books there are on Symposium? But is there anything that speaks to us right now? So used to thinking in you know, in terms of we are all separated individuals, you know, and what is it that can weave our relations together politically and socially? I mean, especially if you look at the economy that runs our politics. I mean, I think it's not an exaggeration to say that. And if you look at how economists think, you know, they think in absolutely, you know, particularistic ways, and we are all individuals with our own rationalities and self-interest and self-interest and self-interest. And I think this is one of the oldest documents that, you know, speaks against self-interest. That interest is inter esse, so like being in between, right? So the whole idea of self-interest is a complete misnomer, and actually has to fail from the start. But so I think anybody who's interested in these things, you know, about how to re-establish meaningful social political relations should probably start with it one, right? That's about it. I don't want to be too long. Thank you very much.
Okay, so after this wonderful, beautiful talks, I think that somebody needs to play the role of evil, being the denominator, who is just undermining your talks. So Diotima starts to talk to Socrates about Eros and putting up the question and asking Socrates whether he can answer or not, that what is actually the effect of Eros. And then somehow it's coming out from the speech, the Socrates speech, that the Eros is the denominator. The denominator who is who begets, who is engendering, and who has the power of undermining the quality, the form of others. Because sacrifice is an extremely eroticized event. And this kind of, and the sacrifice is brings out all of these attitudes of cruelty, aggressivity, and violence, which is absolutely in opposition what we already called out from our through etymological archaeology. And then it's just very few words about the communism, that the communism, the totalitarian systems, which was a kind of eros in politics, because they systematically worked on the self-evacuation of the people, of undermining the possessiveness, the I have of man. And Gabriel Tart has a lot of writings about the I have and the I am. How the possessiveness, how important is the possession of man, and everything what the man possess in property, in family, in identity, in integrity, in contrast of a simple I am, or in contrast of the society, because the society as it is empty. The society has just magnifying what is man, but doesn't give any real meaning. That was Gabriel Tart's big discussion with Durkheim. So this self-evacuation of man from all of its property in the name of the self-sacrifice, and in the name of reaching hazy goals, that was the communist and also the fascist systems' significance, was somehow extraordinary. The totalitarian systems were really totalized the self-giving and annihilation of everything what people possess, and it had a kind of so you cannot really find this in their ideology. Okay, the fascists had very weak ideology. The communists has a very strong intellectual ideology, but beyond this intellectual hodgepodge, there were three important features. The first was this ideology of marginality that advocated the giving up of possessions, all of the possessions and all of the properties what you had, and trusting everything into the hands of the guardians. That was the first one. And the second one was a parallel call of taking up the suffering of the birds into your own body. And the third one, that offering your own body into suffering. And then the whole ideology somehow, not ideology, the whole these 3 points somehow embraced into each other in a complete self-sacrificial mechanism. And in this mechanism was so wide even and so aggressive that even eliminated its own people. It targeted on the first time as a civil war its own citizens, and then targeted the people outside as in the second war. Okay.
I'm surprised you didn't, what I expected you to cite was that Eros has captivating stratagems later on, and that was the whole thing of critique of the trickster we did last year, the sophist, and the sophist has this hook and this captivating stratagems and all these these ways of angling, but she's describing this first, and then she moves on to this thing about beauty, about recognizing beauty, and you were saying that those you can be emptied out by love, and this happens because love divides and fragments. But for those who have learned and have developed their qualities, they will profit by love, and they will be made, they will be ennobled. Your word is creating excellence. But, and this may be a silly question, but I'll ask it anyway. How is it that you can get excellence in the first place? With Huizinga, let's start from play. It must be possible to get excellence before education, because otherwise, how will you get the excellence to educate anyone?
Excellence. But you can strengthen this excellence by learning, by education, by a proper education. What is more, this is the task of people, of educating their own children for being more excellent and taking care of themselves through sobriety and justice and so.
I'm looking here into 208 B, when Major talks about the sort of purely natural reproductive mode of striving for immortality. I mean that Eros is also something, and because you mentioned education, where's the Darwinian element in it? To put it provocatively, because she points the finger to it that every human being is in a way striving to naturally reproduce, and by that achieve or something like the status of immortality. You kind of this identity. Pursuing.
It's a seed we have within us.
Yeah, exactly. So pursue. So like that your identity is mortal, is finite, but there is a way to continue that to make yourself in a way immortal. That's the dream of dynasties.
Often in archaeological evidence, and we discussed it several times, that in recent decades But first of all, the entire archaeology is something that 100 years ago basically was practically unknown, because before Altamira was confirmed there was hardly any knowledge even about archaeology. So archaeology is an extremely new science compared to politics and history and these kind of things. And archaeology has never been properly integrated. And it's very important that archaeology is radically against the Darwinian, Spencerian kind of evolutionists. And in fact, they were the secular evolutionists who viciously resisted the interpretation of cave art as being archaic, saying that all these barbaric primitives and they couldn't have depicted. That was the argument. Primitive, barbaric people couldn't depict these things. And so archaeology still hasn't been integrated into our social science field of thinking. But linguistics is undergoing a similar kind of absolutely radical change of paradigms, which hardly anybody knows about that. And for example, Mario Arinei, who is a very distinguished Italian linguist, has just published basically a 1,000-page book in which he is laying the foundations of what he calls archaeological etymology. It's a 1,000-page work, and he is now 84 or 85 years old. And this at the end of his, he just published it, and he says he's tired to write another book, but he wrote basically 3,000-page books in the last 20 years of his life. And he's trying to refound the principles of archaeology and linguistics together. For example, he argued that the Indo-Europeans always lived in Europe, and in fact the cave art was painted by Indo-Europeans, and he's trying to argue on linguistics and archaeological grounds together. And we just don't know that, and the crucial element of that concerns the question of the origins of languages and etymology, and in particular, Arinei has something about the Hungarian, but let's leave that around. But the Hungarian, because of its agglutinative character and because of its archaicity, contains crucial informations about the past, and especially about the way human beings for thousands and thousands of years thought and lived. And childbearing, the Symposium is much about, again, this engendering, nemzés. It's about how to raise and educate a child, how to give birth, and this is the fundamental element of culture, and this we return to that in Plato. Now this has been completely trascurato in Italian, which in English is difficult, totally ignored by the rights-based utilitarian French revolutionary approach. And where it reaches, in my reading, and you might say that I'm conservative, which I'm happy to accept, that this is, and that's a very fundamental thing, is all of Plato is just about that, what it means to give birth, raise, and educate. It's just the core of culture. And in the name of some kind of rights and democratic principles, this is the destruction of the foundations of civilization. This is systematic element. If we don't face it, then we are lying. This is the issue today. And nobody is facing that because you cannot, because if you talk about that in front of your students, you are more. But then we proliferate lie. And the thing is that we are used to that, because we lived under communism for 2 or 3 decades, and we are very used to a system which is totally and systematically lying. Now, but our democratic systems, from the level of the prime ministers and the neoliberal advisors and managers, up to the level of the student representatives and the student politicians, they all are part of a systematic network of lying. And sort of Plato gives us a way out of that.
Yes. Leave the floor to Sharon, I believe.
I shared with the kids a little bit.
Sure.